Hey everyone, Kilted here. Look, I wanted to sit here and actually do some of these takedown videos, right? So the first one we're going to start off with is a 1911, okay? Now this is my carry gun, and before I get into talking about it, let's actually sit here and make sure it's safe. So we're going to sit here and push this button here, which is the mag release, right? Magazine falls absolutely free, full of ammunition. I put this far away from where I'm working on stuff, right? So I just chunked it. It's a little bit out of arm's reach, right? Next thing we're going to do is we're going to sit here and grab these rear serrations. They also have some up front. You can do it, but I'm old school. I like the rear ones. And you're going to pull it back after taking off the safety. Duh! That was really smart. But here's your safety. Just flick it down and pull it back, and we had a round come out, right? Once again, this is going to get chunked right over there with everything else. So now the weapon is clear. Now, what you're going to do is this little guy here, this is your slide, stop, slide, release. You're going to sit here and pull the slide back, push that up. See, now the slide stays rearward, right? See? So now we can visually inspect. I also put my finger in there just to sit here and go, okay, there's nothing in the barrel, there's no magazine, right? So on and so forth, okay? Now there's two ways to field strip this thing. I'm going to show you both and kind of explain the pros and cons to both of them. So first off, what we're going to do is we're going to take our slide, stop, slide, release here, and we're going to pull it down. Right? You see it just sent the slide home, okay? Now, if you look here at the front of this, let me let the hammer down. There we go. I know it's empty, but still, rule number one, treat every firearm as though it is loaded, even if you have checked, okay? Now, you see up here at the front, we've got four things going on. So here's my metal pokey thing. You have the slide here, right? You have this, which is known as the bushing, right? You have this, by which is known as the barrel, and then you have your spring, recoil spring plunger, right? So that actually moves down, okay? So what you're going to do is you're going to sit here and squeeze that down, and this bushing will rotate. You see how it just rotated a little bit, right? Now, what I will sit here and stop and tell you right now, okay, is some of these require a special tool, okay? And this one's pretty tight. There we go. But the special tool pretty much holds the plunger, right? You'll actually basically loosen up a screw that's in the plunger. That way it can free a little bit better. I know like the SDIs and that kind of thing actually have a block that go in there. Regardless, if you buy one that it needs a tool and you're buying it used, make sure they throw the tool in as well, okay? Because it's kind of useless. Now, what you're going to do is you're going to depress this and move the bushing, like I've got it mostly moved, but you're going to turn it to the side that there's no controls, right? You might have a safety back here, but that's because it's an ambidextrous safety. You're not going to have a slide release over here, okay? Your magazine button is not going to release over here, right? So that's the side that you need to turn the little horseshoe portion, right, to, okay? So I'm just going to finish depressing this, move it all the way. You see how far it is. It's almost 90 degrees, but not quite, okay? Then you're going to slowly release this. Here is your plunger. Now, some of these springs will come straight out, some won't. This one won't, and I'll explain why when we get there, okay? So, then we're going to take this bushing, and we're going to rotate it completely the other way. Now, this part's hard to do and actually show on camera, but basically, right underneath this spring, if I can move it out of the way. No, you're still not really, well, maybe. You got a little bitty lug right there, right? You can just barely make it out if my hands will quit shaking, right? So make sure that that is pointed down, and then you're just going to sit here and grab the bushing. It helps if you have fingernails, but if not, that's fine too. You've got the bushing removed, set it off to the side. Okay? Now, coming back to the slide, go ahead and recock that hammer. Right? You are going to move this slide rearward, but if you see, we have a little cutout here and a big cutout here, right? Now the big cutout is for the slide stop, slide release to fit into, right? And that's what actually holds the whole slide back if we were still under spring tension, right? But what we need to do for disassembly is move that forward, there we go, to where it lines up with that little one, okay? Now, I'm just going to double check here. Yeah, I'm not quite lined up, all right? Now, what you're going to do is on this side, you'll see this pin, right? You're going to sit here and push it. When you push it, you'll see this side, and that slide stop, slide release is pulled out a little bit, right? So what you're going to do is you're going to finish pulling that out, okay? Now, let me discuss this. So you can see right there on the top, right up there, is a little rounded area, right, that sticks up above the actual control itself. You see, it just sticks up just a little bit, right? That's what's keeping it in the gun. So when you line it up with this cutout, it's how you're able to get it out, right? Now, when we're done with that, you're going to grip the slide, grip the frame, move the slide forward and off. Okay? Then, what you're going to do is move your barrel rearward, right? Move the spring rearward, and you see it just wants to pop right out. Now, this little piece right here is known as your barrel linkage, okay? It has to do with timing and everything else, right, of the gun. Flip it forward, okay? Then you pick up slightly, and when I mean slightly, I mean that much, right? And then slide the entire barrel forward, grab it, and pull it out. Ta-da! Right? Now, let's sit here and talk about the spring, right? This one is captive, okay? So the spring fits very tight around your spring guide rod. Now, this is a short one. They do make full-length ones as well. That's, like I said, for the most part, doesn't matter, okay? But what you'll take a look at is here on, oh man, focus. There we go. Right here towards the back, towards the base, you can actually see where there's a little cutout, right? And that cutout goes all the way around. That is basically a captive point for the spring. Once again, the spring fits very snugly, and when you snap it on, you can see, if I can get it to focus, the spring is actually going to be stuck into that recess there, okay? Now, also talking about your spring, there's usually two sides. You have an open side and a closed side, right? So you can really kind of see what I'm talking about. Open side goes on the guide rod, okay, because it helps lock it in. Now, granted, if you flip it around and we're able to shove this on there, but you see it's not easy, right, because this diameter is a little bit smaller to help prevent that. But I have seen some models to where they were the same size. If you flip it around, for the most part, you're not going to see any issues or anything like that. But if you do start seeing issues, that's something to always check. Now, that is as far as we need to go for field stripping, right? So pretty much what you're going to do is get you a toothbrush with your cleaning solution, clean this, clean actually down in here on the magazine well. Go ahead and clean back here where the ejector, disconnector, all that fun stuff are, which we're going to cover more of that here after a while. You can remove the grip panels as well, and that's not hard. Just make sure you have the appropriate size screwdriver, right? and take these off. Let me take these off and then I'll show you what I'm talking about. Okay, so I've got the grip panel off, right? And these screws are very small, right? So the heads are actually bigger in diameter than the screw is long, okay? So keep that in mind. These are easy to lose. Luckily, so many people lose these that companies actually sell whole sets for relatively cheap. But one thing you need to be careful of, I see this a lot, oddly enough, on the higher end guns than the lower end guns. I don't know why, but they do. Is you see where the screws go in, right? These are known as the bushings. Bushings have ultra fine threads because you see the thickness of the metal that they're going through, right? So they need to get as much threads in there as possible, okay? So these are ultra fine threads, which means it's very easy to strip out the threads. So if you go to unscrew your grip screws and you're realizing that as you're screwing your entire panel's just coming up, stop immediately, okay? Take it to a good qualified gunsmith and they'll be able to help you out with that. But like I was saying, it is good to remove your grip panels so that you can actually clean and everything in here. If you take a look, I've got some pitting here just because I bought this gun used, right? And yeah, the guy never took it apart to clean beyond the grip panels, right? So that'll get done here shortly. Now, the barrel, right? This is extremely easy as well. Take your toothbrush, go over it, go around the inside, and then they make brushes, right? Now granted, this one's old, it's almost worn out, but it's just sitting here on my bench, right? These are copper brushes. They get screwed into a cleaning rod, which I thought I had one sitting here, but I don't. And you're basically going to shove it in and out, scrub it really well, and then get clean patches. You can use an old t-shirt, cut it up to where it'll fit, shove it through, that kind of thing. My biggest thing is when you're using old t-shirts, make sure they're white or at least a cream color, right? Because if you start getting into the darker colors and things of that nature, it does make it a little difficult to see all the dirt. But you're just going to sit here and scrub this, run patches through it, then take whatever lubricant oil that you're going to use. There's several companies out there. CLP, Hops makes some. I use Ballistol for the most part, just because I like it. You're going to dip a rag or a cleaning patch in it, and then run it through and back, okay? And that will lubricate the barrel to keep it from rusting on the inside, right? Then we have the slide here, right? Pretty much everything in here needs to be cleaned. Toothbrush fits perfectly in here. One place that most people forget is right here where my finger sits, right? That is actually the slide face or bolt face, depending on who you talk to. But that's where your firing pin and everything travel. So you might want to make sure that that stays really nice and clean as well. And that is it, right? Then we can go into reassembly. So I'm going to pause the video so I can put this grip panel back on and then take you through that procedure. And then we'll go a little bit more in depth on what some of the parts and that kind of thing do. All right, so reassembly is actually really simple, okay? There's a lot of people who make this extremely difficult, but it's not. Now, once I get done reassembling, I'm going to show you the other way of disassembly. I just feel like this way that I've shown you so far is the easiest. So, reassembly is going to be the same regardless, okay? So, you're going to get your slide, flip it upside down. You're going to grab your barrel, make sure that link is forward. You're going to slide it right in, right? You're going to have to jiggle it maybe to get it in, unless you've cleaned it really well. I haven't cleaned this thing yet, right? Then take your linkage and turn it up, okay? Grab your spring, feed it through. Now, I keep it up against the barrel, right? You don't want it to sit up here on the linkage, of course, right? So when it slides down, it'll come to a resting spot. That's where you want it, okay? Now, I take one hand, my left hand in this scenario, and wrap it around, flip it upside down, right? I'm just going to readjust. Then I take my frame that's nice and clean and lubricated, and I'm going to sit here and slide it on. One thing I will tell you that I do is, once again, I'm not a paid spokesperson, but I like this Lucas gun oil, right? You can pick this up at like AutoZone, right? What you're going to do is just put a drop on the inside of this rail, right? So you can see where the needle's at, okay? Just a drop on both sides. Now on this side, since we have this hole here, I'm going to put another little drop back here, okay? That's it. Then what you're going to do is you're going to line up the inside rail sections, by which you can see right here by my fingernail, with the outside slide. You're going to slide it together. Now, this is where it can get a little tricky, right? You see your guide rod has this cutout. That cutout needs to go towards the barrel, right? And then you're going to push everything rearward. Ta-da! Just like that. Now, I got to flip it back around. We're going to sit here and slide this to where that big square hole there will line up with that little bitty cutout, okay? I'm trying to do it slow and also just looking at my monitor. That's pretty daggone close. Now, this is where a lot of people run into trouble. If you look through that hole, which I'm trying to get it lined up for you, you see we've got something blocking. That is actually your link. So what I do is grab something small, get in here, and just kind of do that, right? And then you get your link or your slide stop slide release, and it slides right in just like that. If it gets to where it goes about yay far and stops, that means your link has gotten out of the way again. You can sit here and do this and that and the other thing. I just find it really simple. You can get toothpicks to do this. You can get just a piece of stiff wire, something, right? You want it a smaller diameter than the hole that you're dealing with, right? And it's handy to have a point, but you don't have to, right? Well, you're going to push that all the way through, right? Now, the reason I say that is now you're going to grab it and you're going to swing it into position. Now, on a lot of 1911s, you will see scarring all right here, right? And that's from this, right? So once you've got it pushed all the way through, bring it back just a little bit and just slowly work it up into area, right? And then push it in, okay? If it's tough to push in, then what you can do is get you something really thin and get in between this gap here, right? Because you see there's just a little shiny piece right there. What that is actually a detent that's in this section here that controls that, okay? All right? So you can sometimes get something in between there, something thin. Don't use a butter knife, please, okay? But you can get a shim in there, then the slide stop slide release will work just perfectly. Now we're going to sit here and send the slide home, and as always I lower the hammer. Now why do I lower the hammer? Because it adds extra resistance to the slide, right, which helps. Now we're going to tilt it back up. Once again, on our bushing, you see we've got that little lug, right? That lug needs to be facing the spring, okay? And then you just sit here and slide everything in, okay? Then we're going to sit here and turn that bushing all the way back around, right? Then we're going to grab our plunger, slide the plunger down, and start moving that bushing back over it, okay? Now the bushing's back on it, everything is together. You need to do a systems check, okay? Systems check is very, very simple. You're going to sit here and cock the weapon, let the slide go, We know that it's clear, right? So we're going to sit here and squeeze the trigger. Wonderful. We're going to keep everything nice and squeezed. The gun went bang, it cycled, hammer stayed back, okay? If you're testing out a used gun and this hammer does not stay back, right, you've got issues that need to be addressed by a competent gunsmith, okay? Then we're going to sit here and release. You'll hear that click, right? You might not have, so let's do it again. Listen. That click is your disconnector, right? So now we can sit here, it reset the trigger to where we could squeeze again. Then what you can do is, once again, you can rock the slide if you want. I just cock the hammer, it's a little bit easier. You're then going to sit here and take your safety and flip it up. And then sit here and squeeze the trigger and the grip panel and everything else, right? If that hammer falls, when you do that, you've got issues, take it to a competent gunsmith, okay? But if it passes, you're great, okay? So now let me show you the other way of disassembling, okay? And then we're going to talk a little bit about this gun, this company a little bit, so on and so forth. So we sit here and take the safety off, make sure that it's clear once again. Then what you can do, and this is a little difficult to show on camera, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to be pretty much gripping my hand like so and lining it up just like that, and then pushing this out all the way, okay? This is still under a great amount of spring tension, okay? And then we can sit here and slide the entire slide off. But if you sit here and notice, that spring is still loaded, right? It still has tons of force in here, okay? So what I do is just take one finger or two fingers and grip that and then finish taking it off, because you see what that spring just did. It launched itself off, right? And then you can sit here, remove the spring, come in. Now the plunger has nothing pushing on it, so that makes life easier, right? Kinda. And then everything else can just come apart as we have previously discussed, right? So now this gun specifically, okay, I have been a fan of these guns for a long time, mainly because it is a P1445, as you can see here on the slide. What that means is this is a double stack, so it's a lot thicker than your standard 1911, right? It's a double stacked 45. The magazine holds 14 rounds, plus you have one in the chamber. That's 15 rounds, okay, of 45 ACP. I tell people that I carry it because it's proof that you get a bunch of us big, fat, slow guys together, we can still get the job done, right? And I love when people ask me, what's your carry gun? And I tell them, oh, well, it's a 1911 variant. They go, well, better not have more than 7 people. I go, well, if so, I've got more ammo because the magazine holds 14. And then I sit here and show them the mag, and they sit here and go, oh, shit. I'm like, yeah. So your Glock and everything holds 16 rounds. I've got 15 rounds of 45. You've got 16 rounds of 9mm. Let's play. But something else that's great is, like I said, I've been wanting one of these for a very long time. Local pawn shop had this one, and it was for sale, and I took my wife in and showed it to her. I was like, man, I just really like this. And she's a big fan of 1911, so much so that when we got married, that was actually my wedding gift to her, was a 1911. And I've done a few upgrades and that kind of thing to it while trying to make it look stock. Perks of gunsmithing, right? But yeah, I showed it to her, that kind of thing, and it was there at the pawn shop for a couple of weeks, right? And every single time I looked at it, I was like, man, I had to play with it, so on and so forth. I loved it. I just didn't have the money, plain and simple. And then me and my wife went in again about 2 weeks after the first time going in with her, and it was gone. And she could tell that I was just heartbroken. Well, fast forward a few months, and it's Christmas time, and my wife brings me a box in our bedroom. Like, we had just woken up. I'm still in my PJs, hadn't even had my coffee yet. And she brings me a box. I unwrap it. I'm like, okay, why can't we do this in the living room? Why are you recording me? And yeah, I open it up, and this was the gun. Now, granted, it didn't come in this paint scheme. This was actually the first gun that I Cerakoted before going to Cerakote's class. So there's some things that I screwed up on, right? I'm getting flaking and chipping and that kind of thing. But I understand what I did wrong, and I plan on redoing this. So, if you're still watching this video, comment below what kind of scheme you want me to do, right? It could be anything as long as it's not vulgar, because this is a gun that I'll actually take out and show people my skills on when it comes to Cerakoting. So yeah. But regardless, I'm going to sit here and tear down a little bit more. That way I can actually show you what some of these parts do. Alright, so this is what we've got with the slide pretty much torn down, right? Because of course we've got the slides. Now, I did not remove the sights, right? On most 1911s, the rear sight is going to be a dovetail. There's a few exceptions. And up front, it's either going to be dovetailed or like this one, by which is staked in, which you can see. I doubt I'm going to be able to pick it up on this camera. There it is. Right there, you see the little stake, right? So yeah, there's that. But then you have these four other little pieces. So we have the extractor, right? This is a full-length extractor. Some of them will just have a short one here, by which if that's the case, then there's going to be a dedicated spring and pin that hold it in. You've got your disconnector here. You have your firing pin and firing pin spring. I just count them as one whole unit. And then this is your back plate, okay? So the back plate's real simple, right? It keeps everything together. And if you sit here and look on the back side of this gun, if I can get it in the right angles here, you see we've got tracks on either side, okay? Right? I think you can kind of make that out. Okay, I think this is as far in as I can zoom as well. Yeah. But you've got tracks on either side that this guy just kind of slides through. Now, what keeps it actually locked in place? You'll see it's got a hole in the middle of it, right? See the brightness of the whiteness, right? And then you see here on the back end of your firing pin, this is the side that the hammer will actually strike. And you see it fits right through there, okay? Easy peasy lemon squeezy, right? So the firing pin is kind of sort of keeping the back plate on, but a lot of friction is also doing it, okay? The extractor is held in two ways. One, by the cutouts in the grooves, right? Is held in with the back plate. And also, if you sit here and look, we have this circle here, right? This little cutout here. That is where your disconnector actually sits in, right? And if you sit here and look, the firing pin all the way around has kind of the same thing, right? Right here. And the disconnector sits in it the same way, okay? Well, actually, let me do it this way. That way y'all can see it a little bit better, right? So basically what happens is the disconnector sits in this hole right here, right? And you see it's lined up with this channel here. And when the gun goes rearward, right, we have this little guy here, right? That little guy, okay? If that little guy is pushed down, then the gun is not going to fire, right? When it's pushed upwards, it will push the disconnector here upwards and will make it to where the firing pin is free to move. That is that in an incredibly small, short nutshell, okay? I can go a little bit further in depth, but there's really and truly no need, okay? Now, some of you are going to sit here and even look at the extractor and see that the extractor is pretty straight. I've fitted this one to this gun. Straight seems to be the best. Most of them are going to have a slight curvature to them. That's fine, okay? Plain and simple, that's perfectly fine. But if you need to replace the extractor, once again, I highly recommend just taking it to a good, competent gunsmith. So, that is the slide. I am going to pause the video, put this back together, and then we're going to tackle the lower or the frame here. Alright, so this is about as far as I need to go to explain everything. I've still got the hammer in, the trigger in, the mag release in, and the disconnector and all that fun stuff inside, right? But this is far enough to where I can kind of show everything. So here we actually have our beaver tail, right? The main job of the beaver tail is it is a safety. So this little portion up here, right, actually needs to engage pieces down inside of here, right? And it needs to be able to move back and forth, so you have a spring. This is a 3-fingered spring that needs desperately to be cleaned, so that'll be done today. But now there are several people out there that'll sit here and tell you how to get the best performance is by taking this spring out and start bending the hell out of each one of these fingers. Okay, be extremely careful with those videos, because if these springs get a little short just because of you bending it, right, then the gun may not work properly, right? Or if you have one section that's too strong or too weak or whatever, the gun may not work properly. Because this little guy sits here in here just like this, right? I'm trying to get you lined up. So you see one finger on this side, right, is working your disconnector. You've got another finger that works your trigger and that kind of thing. And then the last one, of course, works the beaver tail, right? So that's it in a brief nutshell, okay? This spring has virtually, for all intensive purposes of this video, nothing to do with your hammer, because you see the hammer's tail is going to ride right here on top of it, right? But if you sit here and start screwing with these, it could throw this tail out of alignment, okay? Now, where does the hammer get all of its power, right? The actual power to slap that hammer forward. Well, that's this guy, right? This is your mainspring and mainspring housing. If you look up top here, you've got a little hole and little silver piece, right? That silver piece is basically a guide rod, right? And inside of here is your entire spring. And at the bottom of that spring is a small detent. I'm going to try to show that if I can. There you go. You can just kind of make it out on this side of the hole. If I can get it back in focus. There. Come on. Hands work right. Anyways, when you're looking at it, you'll see there's a small detent. That detent runs right here in this pin. You see there's a small cutout right here where my fingernail's at. Okay? So that detent fits in there, and it keeps everything together. Because when this goes in, once again, I have to put together a bunch of other stuff before actually settling on this. But without this pin, this mainspring can come out. So your mainspring the mainspring housing pin just goes right there into the frame, okay? Because without this pin, and we go to sit here and cock it, Look at that, right? Pretty self-explanatory, right? Okay. Now, what we're also going to sit here and do is talk about your safety and your slide stop, slide release. This one doesn't have it, but on some of them right here in front of my fingernail, right, you'll actually have a small groove cut out. Some of them have it, some of it don't, but that is for this spring. Okay, this spring has two plungers. You have a small plunger on my left-hand side and then a large plunger here on my right-hand side. And where it sits is right inside of this housing. Okay? Now, for those of you who may not know, this housing is not machined to the rest of the frame. Okay? This is a separate piece that is then riveted in. Okay? So if something were to happen and you damage this, it's not like you have to go out and buy an all new gun. You have to take it to a gunsmith, a competent gunsmith who knows how to install those. I have the jigs and all that fun stuff. But when you sit here and see it completely compressed, you'll notice that this end has a small bit of that detent coming out, right? Right? And that is pretty much what holds this guy in place, right? That way it doesn't just fall out when the gun's turned, okay? Now, this side, the big side, right, actually works on your safety. Now, 99.9% of all safeties are going to have a detent or cutout or something for that to fall into. But now I'm going to sit here and actually show you how the safety kind of works, right? So we have two bars here, a long, thin one and a fat, short one, right? And if you look at the bottom of the fat, short one, you see we've got different cutouts, okay? Those cutouts are extremely important because that is what actually goes in here and starts messing with stuff to block the hammer and trigger and all that fun stuff, right? So I'm going to sit here and install it. Right? Now what you're going to need to do is a couple of things. I usually just have this random punch, is I've got to depress that plunger and see it slides almost all the way in, but not quite. And then there we go, right? And yeah, perfect, right? So what's basically happening, let me pull this back out. Come on, because these things are sometimes a severe booger. But with a little bit of finessing, you can always get them out, right? So when you're looking down here, you can see your hammer's got all kinds of little cutouts and that kind of thing on it, right? I'm not going to remove the hammer, and honestly, the reason I'm not is this is not a video showing you how to take apart your 1911, put it back together, and put different parts in it and that kind of stuff. It's not what this video is. It's to explain how the gun kind of, sort of works. So when it's in its down position here, right, your hammer is free to move thanks to all these cutouts that are on the short, fat one, right? Right? I know I'm getting washed out pretty heavily. I'm going to try to fix that for the next video, right? Then when it's flicked up into the up position, the safe position, it blocks all of that. But that's not the only thing that it does. Remember, if we look at our slide, we have this cutout right here, okay? And it helps lock the slide in place. So as you saw at the beginning, because I was a little bit of a moron and didn't take the safety off before trying to rack the slide to make sure that it's empty, the slide wouldn't come back at all. So that's the second purpose of the slide, or the safety itself. It's not only to block the hammer, but also to block the slide. Now, if you carry this with the hammer down, which granted I'm not a big fan of because this is a single action pistol, and what single action basically means is you have to cock the hammer before you're able to fire your first shot. Your safety will not engage, right? Plain and simple, it just won't, right? There's mods out there that you can do and that kind of thing. I'm not a fan of them, but they do kind of, sort of, sometimes work. So yeah, I'm going to sit here and put this pistol back together, and yeah, sit here and talk a little bit more about it. All right, so there she is. She's all back up and running and everything else. So let's sit here and talk about a little bit of para ordnance, and then go from there. Okay, then we'll actually go out and shoot it. Now, full disclosure, I shot this the other day and filmed it. So yeah, because it was a nice day, low wind. Today we have a nice day, but a lot of wind. So yeah. Anyways, para ordnance was started in Canada in 1985, right? And then there was a importer out in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. Okay. Now, the company was, let's see, Para Ordnance got then retaken. I'm trying to remember everything. Had their name changed to Para USA when it became a USA company. And then the company was taken over by the Remington Outdoors Company in 2012, and then was completely abandoned in 2015. I do not know who owns the Para name now, since Para Ordnance kind of went out of business, right? So, but they offered a wide range of products for law enforcement, military, and the civilian market. They were the original ones to come up with a high capacity 1911 style pistol. Okay? And they made these pistols not only in .45, by which were their most popular, if memory serves me correctly, but also in .40 Smith & Wesson, 9mm, and 38 special, or excuse me, 38 super, not special, 38 super. Okay? And they had a lot of different ones. They had their full-size one, like this one, the P14 45. They also had the Para Ordnance P10 45, but which most actually saw it as more along the lines of a commander style. So shorter barrel and slide, shorter frame, but it still held 10 rounds of ammunition. Now, yeah. Sorry, I'm also sitting here looking through my notes. Now, they also, there towards the end of their run, made 1-for-1 copies of like a World War II era 1911, but I don't think any of those came to the United States. I don't think. I think that was mostly a Canadian thing. And oddly enough now, by my understanding, Canadians can't even hold handguns anymore. So that sucks. But yeah, that is pretty much it. Like I said, I Cerakoted this probably, God, it's been over a year now. And this is while I was testing out Cerakote, and the reason that I still love it today. Granted, it's got parts that are flaking off and that kind of thing, and so on and so forth, but that's my fault. And also, I went ahead and did some testing with this gun. I took the grips off because the grips are almost unobtainium, right? I'm actually probably going to make a mold and pour some acrylic and make some more of these. But I took the grips off, took this outside into my gravel parking lot, and dropped it. You see what I'm saying? And what it mostly was, well, what happens if I were to draw it out of my holster and my hands were wet or whatever, and in the middle of the draw and I'm coming up, the gun just kind of keeps going, right, out of my hand. I did those testing. I dropped it. I also exposed this to a lot of salt water just to see how durable Cerakote is. And this is why I still use the product to this day, right? because I feel like it is a wonderful product. Are there better products out there? It's debatable. But y'all kind of come up with an idea on what you want me to do for this, right? Because I still kind of like this style, but I don't have to have this style. So yeah, y'all just kind of let me know. So let's go out and shoot it. Like I said, I shot it the other day, so I'm just going to cut in that little bit of video. And yeah. Okay, so right fast, I'm using a worse camera, but we're not getting into that. A couple other things before I actually do in the shooting part. But there's a couple little tests. So I showed y'all the test of, dry firing and the hammer has to stay back and you hear the audible reset. There's a couple other things you can do as well, right? If they'll allow you to do it, what you're going to do is take the slide stop slide release slightly out, right? And you're going to push it all the way back in to where it's just like that. And then on a table or something along those lines, you're going to push. You see how that just fell? And I'm not pushing that far back, and it just fell perfectly. That is a good way to see if the linkage, right, that's underneath the barrel is the proper length. Okay, if it's too long, it's going to bind up. If it's too short, it'll bind up, and it won't be able to do that. Next thing is something that you can do anywhere, right? And that is what I call the slide test. So I pull it back, I hold the barrel, right? Everything's still under spring tension, and I start to slowly move my hand upward, right? And it's pushing me, right? The smoother that is, the little bit better the pistol is, right? This one does have some wear issues. Last thing, if the guy will let you dry fire it, this is perfect. Get you a pencil. This is just a grease pencil, right? And what you're going to do is, first thing you're going to do is cock the hammer. You're going to take the pencil, you're going to push it all the way back, and you're going to push. And it should unlock, right? Plain and simple, it should be able to do that. Then what you're also going to do is take a eraser end. This is a grease pencil, so it doesn't have an eraser. You're going to drop it into the barrel, and then you are going to point it at something, right? Not, somebody that you're going to hit or anything like that. You can use your hand, but you're going to shoot, right? And if that pencil comes out, that means your firing pin is good. Plain and simple. I can't tell you how many times I've had 1911s come in and they go, well, it's not shooting. It's not shooting. It's not shooting. Come to find out, firing pin was broken. So, yeah. Now let's go shoot it. All right, so I cut out a fair amount of the shooting on that one, especially the last 5 rounds, because I just didn't like it. I didn't like the quality, that kind of thing. But basically what it was, I had my camera mounted here, and I was trying to wrap around and then look at my computer screen to line everything up, and I was not getting a good lockout on my wrist because I was worried about getting everything in shot. So, yeah. And I'll sit here and explain that I actually did wind up with the last round jamming because of that. Alright everyone, so now is the time to actually sit here and start test firing, right? So what we're going to do, I've only loaded 6 rounds into this magazine right now. I know it's a 14+1, but y'all know how ammo is, right? So, you load the magazine in from the bottom until it clicks, okay? You can sit here and tap it, right? Now there's 2 ways to actually load the firearm. I'm going to show you both ways. Now, what a lot of people would do was sit here and just ride that slide stop slide release, right? So let me fire this magazine, then I'll show you the next way. Alright, to drop a magazine, we've got our button here, right behind the trigger. We can push that with our thumb. Alright, now sometimes magazines will not fall freely, but other times they will. Now what a lot of people will do is sit here and do this little number, but that doesn't always work, right? I'm a big fan of just grip and rip, right? Okay, so I've got another 5 rounds loaded. rather than depress the slide stop slide release right up here, what we're going to do is we're going to grab across the top, we're going to pull back and release, right? Don't ever ride that slide home, because if you ride it home, it will more than likely jam. Not every time, but one day it will, right? So let's go ahead and do these next 5, shall we? Now granted, I did have a jam on that last round, but I'm going to chalk that up to me having to work around the camera and not to the issue of the gun, right? Because you could see that I was not getting a good grip on the firearm, right? But I wanted to kind of show you something else. Once again, I'm not sponsored by anybody, but I really dig these magazine loaders. Upula, I've heard it pronounced several times, several different ways. But basically what you're going to do is you're going to take your magazine, and you see this squeezes, right? So what you're going to do is you're going to squeeze it, set it right over the top of your magazine, push down, drop the shell in, release the grip. Squeeze, squeeze, push down, squeeze, push down, squeeze, push down, etc. Right? Okay, that's it. I hope y'all have enjoyed this. I know it's a long video and that kind of thing, but this is going to kind of be the format that I do videos from now on. So anyways, y'all have a good one.